This is John Drabinski, and you're listening to the Black Studies Podcast, a series of conversations examining the history of the field. Our conversations engage with a wide range of activists and scholars, senior figures in the field, graduate students, and everyone in between, culture workers, and political organizers, in order to explore the cultural and political meaning of Black studies as an area of inquiry and its critical methods. Today's conversation is with Tikia Hamilton, who teaches in the Department of History at Loyola University of Chicago. Along with a number of scholarly and public-facing essays, she is the author of Nothing Less Than Equality, The Battle Over Segregated Education in the Nation's Capital, published in March 2026. In this conversation, we discuss the importance of writing the history of Black life, the centrality of questions of education in Black study, and how Black studies informs her research questions, sources, and approach to writing. Good afternoon, Tikia. How are you today?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm fantastic. I know that this will be coming out in February, but I just always like to mark the moment. This is the Friday of the last week of class for me, so very relieved to have this semester behind me. And, we've been promising to arrange this conversation for a while. I'm really glad that we found the time. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I think your background and the kind of research you do is really central to the field of Black studies. And so getting your perspective on this series is really important. I'm looking forward to it. And really thank you for finding the time in your busy schedule. So welcome to Black Studies Podcast.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And I really appreciate your reaching out and also following up.
Absolutely. I think following up is part of scheduling.
Yeah.
Especially this fall semester, I have to say, nobody had a lot of free casual time.
Yeah.
Everybody was like, not only am I busy, but when I'm not busy, I'm stressed out to the
Right.
point I'm
Yeah.
drinking.
Yes.
But here we are. I look forward to talking about Black studies, hearing a little bit about how you think about the field and how you came to study Black life, and also to hear a little bit about your forthcoming book project. So, and we'll have a chance to get into those more specific questions about research and about the field. But I wanted to start, as we always do, with a more personal question. Just ask you, what drew you to Black studies? What drew you to the study of Black life? And what keeps you committed to and sustains you in relation to this kind of study?
Sure. Well, my question is, how much time do you have? How
We
much
got
are you
lots
going
of time.
to pack
Go.
in? Uh,
Put it
well,
all in.
as I think about this question, and especially in terms of the work that I do, I think that it's important for me to acknowledge the fact that my earlier K through 12 teachers were institutional in, foundational in helping me to appreciate the importance of Black history. And so, as you know, I write about Black education, and particularly the activism of teachers, parents, and Black civic workers. And so I think it's really important to note that my earliest, I would say, inclinations towards the study of Black history began in K through 12. I think that also my sense of, to be honest, my sense of sort of inadequacy around my knowledge of Black history was also something that compelled me. So when I attended Dartmouth College for undergrad, I was very much interested in history, and I remember taking my first African American history class. And as with many people of my era, I sort of developed a sort of a rage and frustration around the history that I felt that I had not been taught, despite the fact that I had attended predominantly Black schools in Chicago. And so I would say in many ways that's kind of where that my intellectual interest in Black history began. And so I was fortunate enough to win a Mellon Fellowship, Mellon Minority Undergraduate Fellowship, which actually helps fund research in a particular study in history. And so I laughed about this when I was thinking about this, because I remember as I was trying to finish my application, I had come up with some topic around Ronald Reagan. I mean, this is like really crazy when I think about it. I wanted to do something about Ronald Reagan, and I was trying to force it, and then realized like this was just really not my strong suit. So I decided to study the resistance of African American women, enslaved women, and just picking up some of the first sets of books. I remember Dorothy Sterling's "We Are Your Sisters," which is a book that includes a lot of primary accounts of both African American women who had been enslaved, and then also free Black women, and just really feeling like, wow, this is a history that really speaks to me. And so I think it was in that moment that I decided that I wanted to study history and particularly focus on the experiences of African Americans. Um, just moved through my career, not necessarily sure if I was gonna, pursue academia professionally. I taught, well, my first job out of school, I worked in corporate America, believe it or not. I taught English at a private school, and one of the things I was really trying to work out is, um, I had an interest in history. I also had an interest in literature. I had an interest in many different aspects. Of African American history. So I think that that was one of the things that I was trying to work out. So I actually participated in a program in 2001, the summer of 2001. It was an African American studies program at UCLA, and I had an opportunity to study. And this was a condensed, accelerated program, but I had an opportunity to study with people like Richard Delgado, who, is in the legal field and has done a lot of work with critical race theory. I had an opportunity to study with Robert Hill, who has compiled the Garvey papers, the UNIA papers, Mary Helen Washington, Richard Yarborough. They were both literary theorists. And so that was my sort of introduction into the interdisciplinarity of the field. And that experience made me want to pursue the studies even further. So I applied to Columbia's program in African American Studies, and there I just continued my research on African American women. I was always asking questions about the experiences of African American women. Particularly, I wanted to do a project for my melon on African American women's resistance under slavery, and so this was just sort of like a continuing thread throughout my career. And so I don't want to say I got off track again, because I think all of this sort of matters, right? But I taught again for some years high school history, and again, just sort of found myself falling back into this love of the scholarship. And so that's when I decided to apply for a PhD. And again, throughout all of this, I was really just really focused on the experiences of African American women. Two projects that I completed at Columbia. One was an extended paper on Black women in the Universal Negro Improvement Association, and so you can kind of see the connection between some of the stuff I was doing at UCLA, and then also my thesis was on the National Association of Club Women, Colored Women, so the NACW. And so, again, just really sort of asking questions about Black women, national identity, citizenship. And these are interests that I carried to Princeton. And so I used probably, I would say, my first 2 years as a time to really just sort of explore my interest. And I just kind of happened to happen into the field, I would say, of education, Black education, because I had some central questions that I wanted answered about Black people's experiences pursuing education. And I wanted to sort of match up what I was finding in the history in terms of this strong emphasis on education in a moment when it felt like there was a great deal of cynicism towards education among African Americans. And so I really just kind of, did some preliminary research, and at the advice of my advisor, then Kevin Cruz, suggested that I take a look at DC. I had some experience, a little background experience researching New York. I was from Chicago, and I, looked at some of the work that had been done, and it seemed like a lot had been done on those two cities. So he suggested that I look at DC, and I just dove right in and fell in love with a topic that was just so complicated and complex, but just so rich and just sort of an untold story of African Americans' experiences in the nation's capital, attempting to achieve educational equality. And so that pretty much is, how I arrived at this position. I In between a time that I finished at Princeton, I did some more soul searching in terms of what I wanted to do. And I know we were just talking about this in terms of, the challenges of the job market. And, by this time, I say, if I can say this on radio, I was a grown ass woman. And
Yeah.
so there were some things that I was just unwilling to accept in terms of quality of life issues. And
Hmm.
so I just, kind of, searched around a little bit more, just tried to decide if this is what I really want to do. And serendipitously landed back in Chicago and a position at Loyola. So that's where I am right now. And of course, the book is coming out in March. So yeah.
It's just so funny, by the way, just March 26th, it's like, God, no, that's really soon.
Yeah,
You know
it's
when you
felt
said
like it's been.
March 26th, I was like, "Oh, God, that's forever," but I'm like, "Nope, that's just a couple of months away."
Yeah, I mean, it has felt like it's been a long time away, especially because, I mean, placing this into perspective, I began this project more than 15 years ago.
Mm, mm,
So it's felt like a very long time, but now that it's upon me,
yeah. It's gonna
feels
make
right
it
around the corner. Yeah,
very satisfying when it comes out.
yeah.
I look forward to reading it.
Thank you.
And I love the sort of, the way the story is able to start with the inspiration of sort of K through 12
Mhm.
education, and but also the frustration with it as you arrive at Dartmouth in this African American history class. But then that it comes back to Chicago. So
Yeah.
that's a nice little tale. And I want to ask you, and maybe this will draw primarily on your time at Columbia. I think you're the fourth or fifth person with a master's from that
Mhm.
in
Mhm.
AFAM from Columbia. Um, it's its own like really important
Yeah.
story in contemporary Black studies and
Mhm.
so forth. But anyway, maybe this question will draw a lot on that, but also certainly on history of education and race. And that's just asking you how you think about the field of Black studies. What's that
Mhm.
portrait that you work with? And I have in mind in asking this question, this sort of historical framing of it in terms of its origin, where on the one hand, the origin of Black studies is a student demand that campuses have a place for the study of Black life. And that's
Sure.
something that disciplines hadn't adequately been able to address or sustain. And so the
Right.
demand for Black studies was the demand for a place to study the Black intellectual tradition and
Sure.
expressive culture. But also, of course, that was the late 1960s, early 1970s when the field is founded, which was also a time of radicalization of Black
Mhm.
liberation struggle, where those distinctions between study and activism, between classroom and community, between books and prescriptive action had really been, if not obliterated, certainly blurred,
Mhm.
right? And so there's also at that founding of Black studies, that demand for a certain kind of politics and a certain kind of
Sure.
prescriptive vision around liberation. And I think this tension at the founding of Black studies between intellectual life and political life is still with us. And so I always
Right.
like to sort of frame this question that way and ask, how do you think about Black studies? What's that portrait for you? And sort of drawing on that question of its origins.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, obviously, there's a lot to be said for this. I think that, I mean, obviously, we think about the 60s and 70s as a defining moment for the field. But I think of that moment as being along a continuum for the demand for education among African Americans, which I was speaking about
Mm,
just a little bit
mhm,
earlier. So I think that as the 60s and 70s came about, there was a great emphasis on recovery. But I think that the goal of recovery and then also the sort of prescriptive elements of Black history really tapped into that longer tradition. So, I mean, I think of the slave reading clandestinely under the tree, right? Trying to hide their spelling books from, the slave master. I think of the educators as abolitionists,
Mm,
Mariah Stewart and so forth. I think of all of them as being part of this longer tradition. The teachers that worked in the Freedmen's Bureau and at the turn of the century and so forth. So I think all of that is important, and to the degree that they thought it was important enough to actually leave records, right?
mm.
They understood that the work that they were doing, especially institutionally with, like the National Association of Colored Women, of course, the work of like Carter G. Woodson, and then, Du Bois in writing Black Reconstruction, they all saw the importance of this field of work, at least to the extent that we could capture the experiences of African Americans. And so I think that the 60s and 70s for me was just sort of a point along a continuum of carrying on that tradition. And I think that I don't know too many people that would argue against the belief that at its very foundation, this work has always been political and politicized. And so
Mm.
I think that it's almost impossible to divorce that element from the scholarship. So in my mind, I see the work as being twofold: an attempt to uh, recover the history, and also to draw upon a history in a way that is transformative, that will yield, a form of liberation among Black folk. And even just, I would say, just looking at some of the work of, like the NACW and, in the moment of 1960s and 70s, I mean, they weren't just simply thinking about what was happening here in the U.S. context. They were thinking about anti-colonial movements and so forth.
Mm, mm.
I think this idea of really trying to reshape uh, systems of oppression and ensure that particularly Black people were empowered. That's how I see the work. I see what I do as part of that longer tradition.
I love that. That's such a fantastic like framing of the question
Mhm.
of Black studies of it being another expression of this long history. Thank you
Yeah.
for that. I
Mhm.
don't think that anybody in this series has articulated a vision of the meaning of Black studies or a portrait of Black studies that drew on that continuum. So I mean, there's lots of things already, and I'm sure will be that make this podcast worth it. But that alone is a really
So
incredibly important
yeah.
contribution to the series. Thank you for that.
I mean, yeah, of course. I mean, it speaks to the work that I do, but I
Yeah.
think that just allowing me to kind of see in that, and not to see these as sort of these, novel moments in time that I mean, it's become a bit cliche to say that we stand on the shoulders of those who came before, but I really believe that that's true. So
Yeah, it's one thing to repeat that trope or whatever you want to call it. It's another thing to actually practice it.
yeah,
To say like, well, what does it mean? And you laid it out there so nicely. I
yeah,
thank you for that. I really appreciate it. It and what you just said maybe already partially an answer to the next question I have for you, which is to ask you about your work in relation to the field of Black studies.
hmm
You know, you've already talked about it a bit. Your work is a mix of of political history, education history, urban studies, and of course you're an historian, so those historian sensibilities, and those generate so many insights for the field of Black studies and study of Black life. But of course, as you assemble them together, they have their own unique kind of
sure.
intervention and contribution. And so I'm interested in how you think about your work in relation to the field of Black studies past and future. That
hmm
is, how do you think it fits in the tradition of Black studies, but also what new horizons or boundaries do you see it pushing and opening up?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think there are a number of ways to think about this question. I think that it's important to point out that some of my earlier work, my strong emphasis on the experiences of African American women, which first introduced me to these Black feminist frameworks, which I think operate at the core of a lot of what I do. and not just simply recovering the experiences of African American women, but asking really important questions about power, power dynamics. And so I think that in that sense, my work is it attempts to do some of that same work. Um, I think that the I guess in some ways this parallels of the what I said before in terms of like this longer history. I think about this sort of long civil rights framework,
Mm.
which I mean, where most of us are familiar with at this point, but I think it's really important in the sense that it really pushed me to think beyond the parameters of a central period beginning like, the mid 50s to maybe, the late 60s, 70s, but to think about some of the precursors. And I think capturing the experiences of women, capturing the experiences of working class African Americans, I think those frameworks that I had been introduced to earlier really helped me read the archive a little bit differently in terms of what I was seeing. So I think that my work really is a part of that, that quest. I would also say I talked about a little bit about how when I first became interested in a project on Black education, that I was thinking about trying to marry what seemed to be this sort of contradictory this contradictory impulse for African Americans to emphasize education as a form of liberation, and then this moment where, there remained a great deal of skepticism about education. And I think that one of the big questions that I was interested in, maybe it wasn't so much as a question, maybe it was something that I observed, and then I just kind of latched onto, was what I call this anti-integrationist framework. So it became apparent to me early on that for African Americans, education had always been not only about liberation, but also about self-determination. And I think that the integrationist framework, and by that I mean, the goal to just integrate schools, because the belief was that, especially in like the 60s and 70s, like with the Moynihan Report and these compensatory education programs, that African Americans were in some ways culturally deficient. And so the goal to be achieved was to integrate schools and therefore
Mhm.
assimilate. But I think that questions about self-determination and what the overall objectives were are really central to the work that I do. And I don't think that I would have had that sensibility had I not had those earlier experiences. It also helped me to read the archive in a different way and to also trust myself, that, that what I seeing was actually, the reality on the ground for parents, for teachers, and civic leaders as well.
No, it's super interesting. And I mean, this may be also then like a note about your book, how your book.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. Sure. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Mm.
Okay, so I'll start again. So that's super interesting, and one of the things just to follow up a little bit is ask you, how you think your book in that way um, pushes a boundary of Black studies, because I do think Black studies that sort of integrationist and anti-integrationist, there are elements of that, certainly in terms of things like identity and nationalism
Sure.
and radical politics.
Mhm.
But what's interesting about the way you're talking about it is in terms of education itself.
Mhm.
And I do think there's something really interesting to me about how the field of education inside Black studies is really kind of a small field at
Yes.
best.
Mhm.
Yet it is an educational like institution and historical event. It's
Right.
students in a learning community
Yeah,
demanding something.
sure.
But the field of education, I just think even just working in that in a Black studies context is already pushing some sort of new horizons and
Mhm.
pressing out some boundaries. I'm interested to hear a little bit about your book and how you think like what the book is doing is like a real hard shove in that push.
A hard shell. Well,
I was trying to figure out how to work with the sort of the
sure, sure, sure,
metaphor of
sure,
the
sure.
push.
Yeah, yeah.
Every
I
book
think
is a hard shove in
right,
our
right.
minds, whether or not it has that effect, who knows?
Yes. Hopefully, yes. I think, well, what's great is that, we are in a moment that, at least I would say several scholars are also, making those interventions. So, in recent years, um, Zoe Burkholder, has published a book called, An African American Dilemma that looks at, this s I guess I don't wanna say, competing, but I guess I would say overlapping strategies, that involve a focus on integration and those that involve, emphasis on self-determination, and she looks across both the 19th and 20th centuries. We just had there's a new book out, called Blacks versus Brown, which is also doing some of that similar work, looking at African American activists in Kansas. So I think that people are starting to get the hint.
Mm,
I think
mm,
with my work, one element that I talk about, I refer to it as the radical redistribution of resources. And so within the DC context, what makes it so compelling is the fact that Washington is a nation's capital, and also a federal city. And unlike the 19 other places that practice legal desegregation, it was a federal city. And so that opened up opportunities for African Americans to leverage, their demands in ways that we don't see in other spaces. And so, one of the things that results from that is the fact that African Americans are guaranteed funding from Congress because Congress has oversight over DC. And so, for a great bit of time, African Americans benefited from some exceptional schools. They had a number of really great schools. They were in close proximity to Howard University, and because of the guaranteed funding and the fact that Black teachers enjoyed equal pay scales with white teachers, it made DC a very attractive place to teach. And so you had people from Howard University who actually taught in the school. So
mm.
it's probably a little known fact that Carter G. Woodson actually taught in one of the public schools in DC in Armstrong, which was a school that focused on vocational study. Anna G. Cooper taught locally in the schools, and so they had a really strong teaching force. So the question is, why would they want to integrate, right?
Yeah,
If
yeah.
things were like so great, and that was the reality on the ground. I mean, I would say for a long time, very few were really pressing for integration, and it really was the NAACP who began to make that push. I would say in the 40s as a result of Depression era exigencies and the fact that some of the disparities between the white and black schools were growing even stronger. But back to my point about the radical redistribution of resources, what you really find is a number of activists saying, okay, integration sounds great and all, but that's a long-term objective that we're not sure can ever really be achieved. And so in the interim, we demand immediate relief for our schools. We don't want our children to spend the bulk of their educational careers in these under-resourced schools. And so we need relief right now. And in a number of cases, they actually demanded white schools, under-enrolled white schools. So they didn't demand desegregation, but they demanded that these schools be handed over to Black communities. And so, I mean, that to me was like one of the most fascinating things to
Yeah,
see
wow.
on the ground. Yeah,
That's amazing.
and they were successful in many cases precisely because white folk didn't want to integrate. So they were like, we
Mm.
either have to give them these schools or we have to integrate. And they chose to go with the devil they knew, right? I think that in terms of really, I think those stories really help to demonstrate the degree to which African Americans were more invested in uh, self-determination, the equalization of resources than they were in this, what many believe was sort of like this ideological stance about integration. In that way, I would say I hope that my work is really making a dent.
I will say that as someone who lives now in the DC area and I've known for a long time many DC people, they have such big egos about their history, and this is really going to feed that. So I
Okay,
think it's important. You're also
they
going to make
do.
them even more insufferable.
Oh my God. I mean, that's one of my fears too, because I can just imagine that person in the audience like,
That's
you
why
didn't
we're
tell this
best.
story. So yeah.
But
That's why I
uh,
joke. I say my story ends in 67. Like most of the people I write about are dead. So, uh,
you don't want them generating even more
yeah,
bragging
right.
points. No, I can't wait to read this. This is super fantastic. Let me ask you then this a little bit about, to back up to, we'll talk about your work, but also sort of back up and think in a broad frame about it. You've talked about this, your BA was in history, your PhD is in history, and your master's degree is in African American studies. And so you have this interesting mix in terms of your graduate training between disciplinary and non-disciplinary or multidisciplinary training. And I'm interested in how that educational trajectory of yours that again moves, between history and African American studies, the multidiscipline and the discipline, how you think that's impacted how you conceive a research project,
Hmm.
but also how you put together and conduct a classroom.
Hmm. Yeah, I think those are really important questions. I would say that with regard to research and writing, I attempt to adopt similar methodologies that are really aimed at challenging monolithic approaches to African American experiences, really aiming at complexity and nuance. And I mean, a sort of a great way to tell this to tell their story is an example of I remember there's someone I write about who's pretty prominent in DC educational leadership, a Black leader, and I actually was working at one of the archives, and I had an opportunity to meet this person's grandson, and was talking to him about my work, and uh, one of the things he said to me, whatever you do, don't make us look bad, right? And I and
That's interesting.
I said, "Wow, okay." I said, "But that's not my job as a historian. My job is to interpret what I see in the best best possible angles." And so, what winds up happening is, in that particular case, I kind of challenged some of the class. Well, actually, a lot of my work really, sort of interrogates the class politics in DC, because what I found is oftentimes those who desired integration most were the more well-off members of African American communities, and so, and in terms of they're willing to unify across, differences, a lot of that actually had to do with, their class positioning in society, and so in the city. So I think that in terms of those nuances, those complexities are something that are really really important for us to get at, regardless of you know how they appear to the outside audience. I'll just say this about that person that I was. I mean, I have an article about him. His name is Garnett Wilkinson, so I'm not saying anything new. But what was interesting is that there's a moment where he was accused of, like stabbing someone, a woman, And he actually was arrested, and it's like,
It's crazy to be laughing. You're like,
I
he was accused of
yeah, yeah.
stabbing
I mean,
someone.
well, not funny for the
I know what you
victim,
mean.
but just in terms of like, what could be worse for his like image. I mean, there's like
Yeah.
buildings in DC named after this man, right? So I have like some of those stories in there. I know you're familiar with the work of Charles Hamilton Houston, who's a giant in African American history, but has been sort of his local activism has been sort of overshadowed by what he's done nationally. So I do a lot of discussion about some of his politics, and as a matter of fact, I talk about how Houston, who was considered the father of or the architect of integration, actually really prized what African Americans had in DC in terms of their phenomenal Black schools. I mean, he had attended Dunbar High School, so he had a
Mhm.
firsthand experience. So, um, you know, uh, in terms of just really making sure that I'm grappling with these nuances is really important. And then in terms of my own pedagogy, I mean, this is what I do on a daily basis. So, whether or not I'm teaching my American pluralism survey class, uh, which you know uses this sort of intersectional framework at looking at people's experiences through the lens of race, gender, sexuality, class. These are things that I really try to push at with my students. Most students, well, I shouldn't say most, but a lot of students walk into the classroom thinking they know everything about history because all you have to do is blame it on rich cishet white men. And one of the things I, do is like, no, we have to like dig a little bit deeper, right? And so we talk about class politics, even in white communities, and my African American history classes, which I just finished one last week. Students walk in thinking that it's going to be a class that's sort of a binary that presents a binary between black and white social dynamics, and a lot of what we do is dive into the intra-racial politics of African American
Mhm.
communities. And so sort of seeing through and we talk a lot about binaries, like seeing through the binaries when we're talking about um, Booker T. Washington and Du Bois, right? Looking at it, looking at their activism, their teaching through a lens that is not simply accommodationist versus or assimilationist. Looking at the work of African American women in that point, so, in that moment. So what were the National Association of Colored Women thinking?
Mhm. Mhm.
When we get to the 60s, the moment in the 60s, doing the same sort of work with looking at what's happening with, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, right? And then also the influence of Black feminism on Malcolm X's politics. Looking at the Black Power movement through the activism of African American women. For instance, Ashley Farmer has a really great book out with that, and so which, by the way, some of that work they do calls into um, they calls this sort of interdisciplinary approach into their work to see through some of that stuff. So
Mm.
I would just say just really like making these stories a lot more complicated for me are important to my research and also to my teaching as well. So it's almost what you thought you knew walking
Uh-huh.
in is going to be the complete opposite of what you know walking out.
That's I mean, look, when we do that in the classroom, that's extremely
Yeah,
satisfying.
yeah, yeah,
They leave walking a little different. I always
yeah,
like that.
yeah,
Well, let me ask you, as one of the last 2 questions I have for you. First one is thinking about the field of Black studies. What do you think that the field of Black studies has done well? But also, what do you think it has not done particularly well?
yeah. So this was one of the challenging. This is a challenging question.
See,
'Cause
it's so funny because I remember when Ashley and I were putting these questions together, and I was like, "Oh, this is gonna be a fun one for people." And then almost everybody's like, "This one was kind of torturous."
yeah, yeah, it is. I think because there's so much that is done well, and So thinking about what it hasn't done well, it's somewhat difficult. But, I would say in terms of what we have achieved, in the field, I think clearly, efforts towards recovery and, descriptive approaches to the field, using it as a way to sort of transform our understanding of politics, the nature of power in American society and beyond, I think has been really important. Particularly again, adopting this Black feminist framework, looking at the experiences of even more marginalized groups within African American communities, and especially now, looking at the experiences of people through the lens of, sexuality, the work that's being done on incarceration, like pushing at the boundaries. I really love, this is, I'm in a moment that I'm so in love with, like, the ways in which a lot of, I would refer to them as Black feminist scholars, and by that I mean people who are sort of using those frameworks, um, are pushing at the boundaries of what we at one point would have called like a sort of respectability politics, not just
Mm.
in Black communities, but towards the actual field of Black studies, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
asking questions that we haven't asked before about sexuality, for example, which has led us to a conversation about surveillance in Black communities in terms of people's sexuality, and then even the way in which African Americans have empowered themselves, to really sort of transgress norms, sexual norms. There's some really great work that's being done in that regard and has really impacted my thinking about a lot of things. So I think that, and what's been wonderful for me about having a career that, I mean, I feel has been somewhat long, even though it's been sort of unconventional in terms of my path through the academy. What's been great is that I would say some questions that I was asking earlier on when I began this process, I see people actually addressing these issues now. And so it's just really a wonderful moment, I think, for us. Um, of course, like the work that's being done on, transnationalism and internationalism, is helping to uh, bridge some gaps as well. And hopefully, even in my some work that I'm thinking about doing going forward, I'm hoping to make use of those interventions. As far as what it has not done well, I thought, I thought about this question, and what I came back to was, we're in a moment where we're under attack, right?
Mm.
The humanities is under attack, and particularly people who do work around race, are under attack. And so I wonder if where we are, our vulnerability at this moment, has in some ways to do with not positioning ourselves in the field in a way that it can withstand these attacks. And I think about, you know, um, the what's happening in our classrooms, like who's taking our classes, like how are we appealing to them, and does that have anything to do with whether or not people are willing to take a stand to say that these are important, um you know this is an important area of study. So I think that if I had to say one thing about, what I would like to see done better is positioning ourselves in a way that we can kind of withstand the chaos of the current moment, and also to imagine, you know, if we do come out of this alive,
It's a
um,
question. Yeah.
imagining, what is it that we need to do to ensure the longevity of this field going forward.
I mean, I've said this on my side of the podcast many times. I think this moment is forced us to ask exactly that question,
Yeah,
like who are our allies?
yeah,
Will anybody refuse to work, go to class, refuse to teach, whatever,
yeah,
if they shut us down?
right,
And if the answer is I'm not sure, then we definitely need to think about like how did we arrive at a point where
sure,
we don't have any allies? Because I
right,
think not sure that the field has community allies
mhm,
and campus allies.
yeah, no,
That's
yeah.
yeah,
And I
that's a
think
very tough question.
even with like the students, I mean, sort of one of my gripes is that, I mean, I teach at Loyola, which in terms percentage-wise, in terms of the number of Black students that attend Loyola is not very large to begin with, but, uh, I'm I'm not seeing many Black students in my classes, and so, uh, that's a question that always, perplexes me. Um, is it because of the demands of the economy? Is it because they no longer feel a sense of connection to the history? Is it because they feel like, I mean, clearly we don't live in a post-racial moment, that's been proven. But to what degree do they feel that, that we need to move beyond, quote unquote, these what they perceive as simply being about identity politics? Um, I'm not sure. And so, that's something that I think about often. Like, what is it that we can do to appeal to students, but also in a way that maintains, the rigor of the field. And
Yeah.
um, I'm not sure what the answer to that is.
I was hoping you were building towards the answer. We all
Yeah,
need
yeah,
it.
yeah.
Shit. I was like, oh, do we have an answer?
Mhm.
No, this is such a crucial question, and maybe it's already an answer to the last question I have for you, which is thinking about the present and future of Black studies, and in that context of the present and future of Black studies, what is the one question that you would want us to be asking, or the one issue you would want us all to be thinking about?
I mean, that was it basically. It's like, how do we survive?
Yeah.
That's really, really for me, I think what it boils down to. Um, how do we survive? I think this question is so important because Black studies has done such an exceptional job in terms of pushing us to think critically about the society in which we live, the world in which we live. Um, you know, Helping us to really ask important questions about democracy, meritocracy, right? Um, we are responsible uh, for encouraging the use of skills that are completely antithetical to the fascist state that we're moving toward, right? And so it makes sense that we would be under attack. And so, how can we maintain that political objective, um, and really sort of and survive in this moment? I mean, we see, across the country, institutions caving to the demands of the Trump administration. And as they cave, I mean, what does that mean to us? Do we have to compromise in any way to survive? So I think that really for me is the essential question: is how do we survive? And then as we survive, hopefully, how do we continue to thrive as a field that students and the wider public still regard as essential to the way we think about, you know, our experiences as Americans, our experiences within a global context? I'm not sure.
Thank you so much. That's a fantastic place to conclude this. This has been. I was really looking forward to this, Tikia, and it has really been, um, you know, uh, everything and better than I was hoping for. So, thank you again for making time, and thank you for your thoughtfulness and the really serious questions that you put out in front of us, and for further inflating the egos of DC people
Uh,
historically. Um, and this is just a really wonderful contribution to the series.
Thank
So
you.
I
I really
really
appreciate
appreciate
it.
you.
Thank you. I enjoyed it very much.
All right. Well, have a great rest of your afternoon.
You as well.
All right. Bye bye.